see. So today is September 9th, 2019, and I just feel so honored and so pleased to be with Kelly Brogan. Kelly and I were just having a pre-conversation about this meeting that we're having today, and at some level, Kelly said that there may be like one activist in this country that is carrying on as a psychiatrist in the world of really taking a look at the necessary paradigmatic shift that's required in order to maybe turn the psychiatry thing on its ear and bring mental health back to where it's supposed to be. And she said there might exactly be one. I'm assuming that one is me, and I'm not sure.
I was thinking of you, and then Bregan. We got
right, Peter Bregan and Peter Bregan, and the three of us, and we have to look far and long for other people who are taking a stand like this. And for you psychiatrists who are out there who are taking a stand, welcome aboard. And really just come aboard. Can't wait to meet you and talk with you and learn more about what you're up to. So welcome to the conversation, Kelly. It's really, really fabulous to see you. And
thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited to be such a like mind. Yes.
Yeah. So, I had the opportunity in preparing for this conversation to read at least the start of your book. I'm going to admit that I haven't read the whole thing, and I was immediately just entranced with it, and really just, I can't wait to get right back to it after our interview here. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing with your life now and what led you to write this book, and what kind of impact have you been making or been being made on you that has you see that this is the time for this book to be released?
Yeah. So, requires a little rewind because I wrote a book in 2016 called A Mind of Your Own. And I did that because I had my own encounter with the medical system through the diagnosis of an autoimmune condition that is ostensibly chronic. And I just didn't want to take a prescription for the rest of my life, despite the fact that I had been writing them, left and right, including to pregnant and breastfeeding women as a reproductive psychiatrist. And so I began to examine many of the kind of sacred cows in medicine, but chiefly in psychiatry. And it led me to Robert Whitaker's work and led me to put down my prescription pad for good. So in 2010, since 2010, I've never written a prescription for a patient, a new prescription for a patient, and dedicated myself to tapering. I was really angry though. I had a no small amount of righteous rage, not only because I had never encountered any of the studies, for example, in anatomy of an epidemic in my training. And I've been on PubMed, I'm very comfortable with it. I've always been interested in primary literature, and I never read those studies. And I certainly was never told you could heal a chronic illness. It's not even put on the menu of options or possibilities or potentialities in allopathic medicine, where the goal is simply just management, right? And so I thought, I'm going to put all this science into this book, talk about how I healed myself and how I'm applying this to my patients, and no one's ever going to touch a medication again. That's literally what I thought was going to happen.
Right.
Because I thought it was just a matter of information, right?
Right.
What I learned is that there is something much more nuanced going on. And I think it has to do with foundational beliefs and the ways in which those beliefs interact with our healthcare, right? And our self-care and our disease care. And so what I found is that the testimonials of healing that came from A Mind of Your Own, so people just read a book, did what was in the book, were not explicable through just transmission of information. I mean, this was like, people who had been diagnosed bipolar for 25 years, who came off of meds and were done with their psychiatrists. And to me, that information couldn't possibly have achieved that. So what happened there? What I now, in retrospect, many years later, and having scaled this protocol to thousands of people online and continued in my practice, what I've come to understand is that the information in that book simply validated the intuition that was very, very buried in those individuals, that they could, in fact, transform this pain into power. And that validation is what ignited their own innate healing process, right? So it's not about convincing anyone or changing minds. So at this point, I see myself potentially as not only a gatekeeper, to the pharmaceutical realm, so that I can do what I can to make sure that informed consent is possible, that people know about the untold story of these medications, both in terms of limited efficacy and adverse effects, but that also, people have these very basic tools to support and validate their inner sense that there is something better out there for them, that there is life beyond psychiatry available to them. And so a lot of what I've foregrounded is not only, how to walk this path, potentially some of the road signs, but also these stories. I think we need to know what's possible in order to know what we desire for ourselves.
Right. It's beautiful. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that something gets unleashed in these people to get that there's already innately something that's pre-existing that offers the possibility of healing anyways, and that it's almost like a lifting or a non-doing, an unveiling of what the psychiatric field or what the psychiatric prevailing conversation has brought their way.
Exactly. And I like to say that despite our best efforts, scientifically, technologically, medically, there are many things that are complex that we do not know how to engineer, right? So we don't know how to engineer healthy soil, right? We don't know how to grow, in a forest ecosystem. We simply know how to create conditions and, frankly, as you said, get out of the way. So I think a lot of what healing consists of, and radical healing. I've taken a great interest in radical healing that defies the dogmatic assumption that chronic disease is a given. That the conditions for that are surprisingly basic, surprisingly simple, but that the most important ingredient is the mindset, is the belief that this is possible, and almost that it's an entitlement, right? So you're going to get that no matter what. So that posture, I found, is it cannot be replaced, and it's an essential piece of these stories.
You're speaking with. Thank you very much. It's really quite beautiful what you're up to, and it really is a deep honor to be having this discussion with you. And there's a new level of what I'm hearing, that there's an alignment with the times that has you being very comfortable speaking to your life's work here. That well, maybe comfortable is a little overstatement, but having you be courageous or proud or bold enough to take a stand in this area that really flies against what is otherwise the default prevailing conversation. Can you say something about how, I'm sure you get equated to fearlessness in some occasions, either being fearless or courageous or bold or strong or, alternative. What is it, Kelly, that for you has you being able to stand, calmly and firmly and compassionately inside of this stand that actually does fly against the ongoing prevailing conversation that may be subject to some transformation, quite honestly, in the present paradigm?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I have a program from childhood that is quite defiant, and doesn't take anyone's word for it, right? And so, that comes from arguably probably relatively common wound. And so this program is what led me ultimately to begin when I was pregnant in 2000. Well, it would have been 2008, to begin to question some of the things that my OB was telling me about at that point, right? And so I said, I'm going to do this my own way. I know how to read studies just as well as you do, if not better. It's like this kind of like know-it-all. It's the know-it-all of my shadow that actually has served me for some time, because it's led me to investigate for myself. And what I discovered, particularly when it started to come to my own health, I never had any health-related dealings or doings until pregnancy and postpartum. I think I simply learned a different version of the truth. And my mentor in later years, Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, he always said to me, Kelly, your only job is to love the truth. And I never
Mm.
really knew what he meant by that.
Wow.
But these days, I feel he's passed, and I feel his presence, and I feel like that's what I'm doing. I was in a position when I was still very entrenched in my programs and my unexamined wounds. And before I'd really gone through dark night of the soul and my personal awakening process, I was very entrenched in this concept of fighting, right? This idea of fighting the system. And we're so enculturated around warfare. I mean, look at the names of our medications: antidepressants, antihypertensive, antibiotic. It's just like, rallying to get the big bad enemy out there. And
Yeah.
so of course we have no understanding of the possibility, the quantum, physics perspective, that out there is simply a mirror of in here.
Yes.
So quit fighting, because you're literally warring against yourself. And so what I've come to in healing that within myself, and understanding that, I can fight this all day long, but in the end, I'm still going to be at war. So how are we going to heal collectively? How are we going to resolve this one and all? And I came to understand, well, I'm going to love what feels good to me. I'm going to choose to love a reality that allows for healing, a reality that makes room for the meaning of crisis and illness and grief and struggle, right? And I'm going to inhabit that reality and do everything I can to support its existence, simply because it feels safer for me in the world to do that. So I don't know that I would identify it as like courageous or fearless. It doesn't feel that way to me. It just simply feels like I need to live in a world where this kind of healing is possible. And I know that it is, because I've seen it. So how can I amplify and support that? Because it's the world I want to live in. It's the world I want to raise my children in, So it's really more about that than it is about winning against the old model. The old model, like it's never going to leave me. It's in me. I was trained by it, right? So I can't pretend like I'm not even still using some of the tools of the trade within myself, within my, psychology, and I'm forever lashed to the allopathic system. So I'm not going to pretend that it's this horrible bad thing that I need to kill, because it's a piece of me too. But
Yes.
I am going to try and nurture and grow this other side of me, that, is more yin. It's more soft. It's more receptive. And it's certainly more curious as a reflex rather than controlling.
So yin and soft and receptive and curious, and in the word you used earlier is safe. It's really fascinating as I listen to you, because I really relate to all of that. It's like, it doesn't appear for me to be that I'm rogue, or that I'm courageous or bold, or taking on the system. It actually, I love what you said about safety. That this world, when I can take into consideration that that there is space for pain, for emotional discomfort, for depression, for anxiety, or for confusion, for aimlessness, for misery, like all of those things as part of the grand human experience, then I get to expand myself and, in fact, live into that truth.
Yes.
And when I bring out that to I don't even know that when I'm speaking that way as an MD or as a psychiatrist, it's having some, I really don't know as I'm doing it that it's having some kind of large impact over there. It's almost like, well, that's good, because I would do it anyways. And there's something about learning this and being with it. Really, really beautiful. What is, what I have my answers to this from my field, or from my perspective, but I'm wondering from you, like, what are some of the hurdles that you're running into? What are some of the pushbacks? What are some of the things that, in fact, if you really, at the end of the day, you look at them, you're like, yeah, that's substantial. What's in your way?
Yeah. So, when I published my first book, there was a totally, impenetrable mainstream media blackout. I was with a top 5 publisher at the time. You know, they handed out the galley to the Today Show and Dr. Roz and all Nightline and whatever. And they literally got back, no, 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 no. And then even from, I think it was ABC, they got back, if we were to allow your author on, it would be bad press for both of you. So that didn't surprise me, of course, with 70% of media subsidies coming from pharma, you know, that's only to be expected. And I certainly wasn't surprised by that. There has been, since then, like I've been largely ignored, which is fine with me because it's sort of like, okay, I'm going to create, as Bucky Fuller says, like, don't fight the system from within it. You know, create something that makes it obsolete. So, okay, so I'm working over here, you know, on my thing. What in the publicity for Own Yourself for this current book has been kind of like jarring for me and unexpected is that even in wellness communities, spiritual communities, yoga communities, that I'm encountering resistance. I mean, I did an interview with one of the biggest, you know, celebrity wellness platforms out there that will remain unmentioned.
Sure.
Last week. And literally it was the most contentious interview I have ever done in my career. It was frankly adversarial. The editor that I was being interviewed by she took such issue with so many, she all had all the page numbers out of all the things that I mentioned in this book about that just question basic dogmatic assumptions around, you know, science. And even in the realm of psychiatry, like the role potentially of medications in the Parkland shooting, you know, this kind of stuff. And I recognize in that moment that it's really not, again, same message. It's not about information because I am still in the allopathic mindset a lot of the time. I have the science cataloged in my mind defensively, right? So when you come up against the consensus, when you come up against the status quo, you're far more adept at recruiting, you know, science and your intellect in service of this new story, right? So I have it all. I can defend every single statement I make with published literature. And I have a staff of med students and clinical volunteers who help me to write up these cases. We just published another one yesterday on Graves' disease, you know, just because I'm still in the world where that matters, you know, where the science matters. It's a currency of exchange. But I was able to see, wow, you know, this platform can't go there. They can't go there. They can't go to the place that allows us to question what we've been told about genetics and disease and even bigger concepts, you know, introducing quantum biology. They just need it to be smaller and more familiar. And I was there in my past. I get that, you know, but it's dissonant when it's even in these burgeoning communities that say they advocate for, you know, self-care and personal responsibility. And I think a big piece of it is recognizing how entrenched we are in our victim mentalities, right? That then we all are. I mean, I spot one in my life every day where I'm telling a little story about poor Kelly, right? And it just is part of this moment I think we find ourselves in where we're like, are we going to grow up now, right? Like, is it time to adultify? Because fundamentally on a psychological level, transitioning from that victim mentality is perhaps the initiation into adult consciousness, and it requires personal responsibility, and that could be so uncomfortable. Yeah, I love that word, right? Because it's responsibility, right? It's so that you're no longer reacting from fear and recapitulating these past patterns that might have helped you as a kid. But honestly, as an adult, they're keeping you stuck and in fear, in perpetual fear. So how can we cultivate this responsibility so that we can interact with what is from a place of groundedness and really locate that sort of nexus of control within ourselves? And that's what it is to become an adult. But I'm not sure we have many models for that culturally.
Right, right. So again, a completely beautiful answer. My follow-up goes something like this. I also completely resonate with that experience, number one. So, and number two, there's like, it's just like jaw-dropping when I bring this to who I know to be advanced thinkers who
Yes.
are on the cutting edge of so many different things and ready to take on what it is to be an evolved human, or what it is to be free and capable and functional and making a difference, like a transformation in the world around us, and grouping up and as global citizens, and hitting third world nations, and sustainability. And this is who they are. This is who they really are. I
Yes.
know them to be this. And then bringing this conversation into that land sometimes is just a massive slingshot out of it.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, this is really a deeply entrenched way of being that must work at some level. It must work because these people are pretty good, at least in my world, of undoing things that didn't work for them. And now they're taking on new ways of looking at things in different realms. But in this one,
it's the carve out.
It really hangs on. It really does. So people like, especially in the diet, I have found myself more recently calling myself non-diagnosing rather than non-diagnosing and non-medicating. And I find this, it's like I no longer diagnose. So I don't just put down my prescription pad. Now I've also put down any kind of diagnoses.
Awesome. I love that.
Right? It has a lot of implications. It has a lot, and it's way easier. It's way easier. Then I don't have to be anti-pharmacological either, because it isn't really about that. What's there to treat if there's no diagnosis? No problem.
Thank you.
And there's no stigma either, by the way, because there's nothing to be stigmatized. It's all great. You are who you are. And people seem to like it conceptually, completely amused by it. Like,
but
people
in practice,
but in practice with their family or themselves, there's a massive pushback still.
That's the bait and switch I've observed around this system, because there is something very validating. Okay, so we are all walking around with this deep, dark belief, I think, based on, childhood experiences, that something's wrong with us.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like, we're all hiding that secret belief, like
something wrong with me in the world of us, you mean?
Exactly.
Yes?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, I got that.
And I hope that I can keep the mask up so that nobody ever finds out, right? Like, I hope I can curate my traits, or be self-deprecating in an artful enough way or whatever, so that nobody sees just how broken and damaged and even sick I am.
Yes.
Right. And so when you sit in that chair and you get that diagnosis from your priest or priestess physician, it's something of
anointment, like an anointment, huh?
And it's validating, right? Because they're saying, yes, you're right. Something is wrong with you. And not only that, it's always been wrong with you, and it always will be. So the best you can do is to manage it. And so there is a moment where you feel seen, right? But what happens is when you habituate around that dynamic, not only are you obviously dependent, literally and figuratively, on this clinician, you become dependent on their transitional object, on that medication, literally, chemically, and otherwise.
Yes.
But what happens is that you identify in that, again, childlike posture of authority outside yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the bait and switch of it, is that there is no way for you to both assert your self-authority, agency, and to actualize an adult and remain a patient. They're incompatible, which is why you're trying to liberate people from even the labels, right? And you're saying, I'm not going to participate in that. But there's some part of them that feels like, well, then how do I know what's wrong with me? I know something's wrong with me.
Exactly.
And the truth is, like, how do we begin to I guess, relume a sense that there's meaning in what we understand to be our undesirable parts, the weird things that our body does, the ways that we respond that are embarrassing to us, our anger, our shame, our rage, like our sadness. Like, how do we begin to turn towards our particular brand of that, our particular signature around that, and finally make peace with it. It's the most difficult work, and very few people are doing it. But the people who I think get captured by the system, psychiatry, who get captured are exquisitely sensitive individuals. And in my opinion, are some of the most powerful and important at this moment in time, that their particular impact as visionaries, as healers, as artists, as creatives has never been more needed, right? To begin to fully dismantle this system that has run its course, that is predicated on straight lines, ones and zeros, and, bad and good. We need those kind of fluid, Alan Watts calls them the goos, right? So there's like the prickles and the goos, and there's these different kind of types of beings. And so I think that these highly sensitive folks are the ones who get captured, and they get told, this is what's wrong with you, when what I've observed is that's actually the seat of their power. Exactly. Nobody's taught them how to use it. They have no guidance, no elders, and no true validation that would say, yes, I know you feel pain, and I know you feel disconnection, and there's a way to transform that. There's a way to secure that under your own wings.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's almost, this idea of like flipping it on its ear. The idea here is that the people who were calling abnormal, or who were agreeing that the hospital or the system has captured, who are just pure in their, the mismatch I think you speak of in your book, this mismatch between what they know to be necessary for their own soul and what's really going on the outside. And this mismatch creates some form of expression that appears to be odd to the homogeneous status quo.
Yes.
Well, what happens, it seems like what happens then is that people get captured, get called abnormal, and then get, who knows what happens. It's never very good what happens once captured. And one of the things I'm hearing you say that I'd like to hear your view on is this idea that we, maybe all 7.7 billion of us actually, go through a period or in our early childhood, and then maybe every day from then on, this idea of hiding what's wrong with us, knowing that there's something wrong with us, and then followed up with absolutely being committed to making sure that nobody else sees what's wrong with us. So there's this combination of, yes, there is something like completely strange and wrong about me, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure that you and nobody else ever sees that, whatever facade. If it could be gotten by everyone that experience is in the essence of normalcy too, what would happen then is what I always wonder. What if we all knew that we go through feeling profoundly abnormal as an absolute normal aspect of being a human? Like undoing that from its very heart, that has people get that, oh, that means that everyone has this. And the answer is right. Actually, it's one of the most universal, if not the most universal emotional experience that we as humans all share.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think you can look at it on a spiritual level, on a basic psychological level, but I think that the experience of conditional love as children, right? So whether, it was an incest or acute violence or chronic neglect, or whether it was, the way your mom made a face when you got a 68 on a math test, there were many moments likely where we experienced conditionality of a primary caretaker's love, right? And we began to understand, there are certain things I have to do, there are certain ways I have to be in order to feel love, which of course is an existential currency of survival to a child, right? And so those adaptations, those defenses, those survival skills on a personality level probably served almost all of us, right? So I have like this mercenary, I call it my mercenary program. It's a mercenary defensive structure where the moment I perceive that somebody might not agree with me, I'm like, forget it, I got this. I don't need you, you know? And I'm sure that served me at points in my childhood where I could cultivate independence. In moments I perceived I couldn't rely on my parents to provide me what I needed, right? And protect myself.
Yeah.
So there is not a person who has escaped this. The only differences between us are our defensive structures and how we have found ways to navigate our projected expectations of others in our adult life. But the interesting twist is that we have the capacity to parent ourselves, right? And it's more than just a capacity. It may be kind of the point of life, to come to this experience of unconditional love, not through a partner who's going to adore you till death do you part, not through your own child, right? But actually through your relationship to the mosaic of you, right? And this is kind of it's what I refer to as like the holofractal nature of reality, where if we can create the conditions for that, where the moment you do something that you're like, why the hell did I do that? The moment you do that, you say, it's okay. It's okay. I forgive myself. Right.
Yeah.
And you learn to mean it, right? It's from a simple practice like that to beginning to understand the weird, interesting, and unique ways that you interact with reality, right? Beginning to see your triggers, beginning to see your habits, beginning to see the ways that you abandon yourself and violate yourself in service of others, all of these things. It can become this process of self-discovery that I actually believe then creates something like Rupert Sheldrake would call a morphic field for possibility collectively, right? And so it's like this, yes, it's time to do our own work. It's time to heal in this way and generate the experience of unconditional love as individuals, but that is also healing the collective. And that's also really the only thing we can offer this planet that is, my gosh, what we are up to, right? Like, and that's why I love, Krishnamurti's quote where he says, it's no sign of health to be well adapted to a profoundly sick society, because we are on, this planet is on her deathbed, and how are we going to respond? I have a friend, philosopher Charles Eisenstein, who says the only thing that convinces an ailing relative to stay instead of exit is love. Right? So how do we really show that? But we can only show it to the planet, to others, to the capacity that we can feel it for ourselves. And that's why, whenever we feel sensitive to the judgment of others, odds are it's a metric of how much of that our own self-judgment is still active. And so, finding a path to healing that, I think, begins with an unmedicated consciousness and begins with, kind of turning towards oneself in a way that says, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're doing, it's got to mean something, and I'm going to figure it out, right? Meaning to yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I really, really astonishing. I wonder if there's also just a space for this, what I like to call the second derivative of what you're talking about, which is to get also that when I'm judging myself, even that's okay. It's like being
Totally. Yes. It's a
being
meta,
careful to get the next level as well.
Yes.
And then being able to embrace that.
Exactly. I love that you brought that up, because what can happen is, especially in the like holistic health world of nutrition and lifestyle practices and all these things that we can be doing to make ourselves better and healthier, it's really, really critical. I call it kind of discipline without judgment. It's really critical to both exercise your choice, recognize and acknowledge, the power of your will and commitment, and then simultaneously do it without an agenda, right? Because what can happen is, as we're healing, we can sort of see it as like some linear progression towards godliness or something, right? And what happens is then you're judging your past and previous iterations. And then of course, anyone who reminds you of your own past self, you're going to judge, right? So for me, that would be like really stark, right? So I judge my previous prescribing psychiatrist self. And then naturally, anytime I meet a psychiatrist or clinician who believes what I did, I'm going to judge them too. And that serves no one, right? And it traps me in a world of not only direct judgment, but as you're describing, meta judgment of my judgment, because now I'm aware of the toxicity of judgment. So it's this recursive effort to allow everyone to be who they are and recognize that my only responsibility is to find okayness with what I am. And to learn to actually find meaning in it. You know, I like to say that suffering ends where meaning begins. It really is true. If you can frame your process of whether it's, you know, terminal cancer or, you know, a diagnosis of OCD, you know, if you can frame that with a different narrative that is more kind of peace oriented, you know, towards your own experience, then you'll find that your nervous system, literally on a physiologic level, stays in regeneration, doesn't flee into fight, flight, freeze, and that you have this capacity to cultivate that watching eye, that meta consciousness that allows you to interact with what is from a place of, you know, dispassion, from a place of neutrality, from a place of okayness. There's always that little voice that's saying, wow, gosh, what's happening now? This is interesting. And it's a totally different way of being. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's great. So one of the, you know, a lot of life is funny. And
in summary.
and last night and this morning, and I'm staying in a really an exquisite place in Vermont now, and I am staying with a truly extraordinary human being for the week that I'm lucky to be in the first of all in the same earth with, but let alone in his house with him.
I love it.
Really quite beautiful. And so some of the conversations that I've had recently have been about these words about manifestation, law of attraction, vibrational states, you know, this idea of really already having everything I want all the time, including when that what shows up is actually what I'm calling for to show up, including pain and misery. Like that's what's next.
Yep. Yes.
So the opportunity, you know, as we have this conversation, we might, while we're on it, that we're just kind of having a conversation, but this is an interesting vibrational conversation between two contemporary psychiatrists, after all.
Yes.
And the impact of this is entirely, as this stone gets thrown into the river, it's very unclear what the level of impact it is, not only what has led us to be on this call, but then what gets created as a result of you and I meeting on this call is very fun for me to just fantasize about. Like what is, you know, what is the manifestation that has you and I speaking to this new nature of, well, it's not even new. It's speaking to almost the old nature. The
remembrance. I love this word. I learned recently, anamnesia. It's a Greek word. Maybe you know it. And my understanding is that it refers to the remembrance of something once known.
Oh,
and that's
great.
Kind of, I think, the feeling that many of us are having. And of course, it's being dubbed an awakening process, or something of a zeitgeist right now. But it's like you sort of were like, is it new? Is it old? I think it's that feeling, like that validation that we have the capacity, given our credentials, to provide individuals. You know, we can help them to remember what they've always known, which is that they're perfect. They're perfect.
Exactly.
Literally perfect.
Literally perfect.
Not some spiritual bypassy Pollyanna nonsense. That it's a worldview that allows for there to be emergent beauty in the exquisite design of the balance and totality of all of the reality that we perceive. And I love what you said. In fact, that you'll find that sentiment in the book. To be from my best friend, actually, Tara, who said that to me one day. I was complaining about, I don't, God knows what, like, you know, this house I couldn't sell or whatever. And she said, you know, I believe that if you don't have something, it's because you don't actually want it.
Exactly right.
You know? I was like, what are you talking about? I've been, you know, praying for this for years. And, you know, that was my superficial reaction. But of course, deep down, there were reasons that I wasn't ready to deal with what would come. You know, it's like Rilke says, I bastardize all these quotes, but you know, it's like, you won't get the answer until you can properly live it, you know, like there is if you want to call it a divine timing or some kind of really deeply meaningful unfoldment. And I think when we can get beyond the egoic echo chamber of our own childlike fears, and of course, this is in the realm of mystical experiences that people have, and many people in the world of psychiatry are natively predisposed to having. And of course, that gets you know, sort of put in the psychotic box. But once you enter into that realm, what do people come back and say? They come back and report a level of connectedness, a level of design, an incredible awe-inspiring beauty to the simple fact of being, right? To the privilege of experiencing this human mystery. And so that's where we can see, oh, wow, the suffering comes from the story we're telling ourselves about what's happening. There is no inherent suffering. It's only suffering because we say it is bad. And we've been enculturated and conditioned to believe that it's bad. But that's really, you know, what folks who are taking control of their health experiences and reclaiming themselves from psychiatry, that's the work they're doing. You know, they are showing us a different type of reality, a different way of relating to struggle and uniqueness, even, you know, to their particular signature. And it's so important right now.
You know, there was a doctor when I was in, I think it was fourth year medical school. It may have been my first year of residency. There was this man who showed up with wild hair, and I think it was in Cincinnati. So I'm pretty sure it was fourth year medical school. And he showed up with the people who were in a psychiatry rotation. And he was talking about that he was a soothsayer. He knew the way the world was about to go. And he almost showed up like a Back to the Future kind of man who was like, you need to watch me because what I'm telling you is how this is going to go. And he actually said all sorts of things about HMOs and about PPOs and about medicines and about how everything's about to change. And now I want to, you know, I would love to meet this man again because he
tapped into something.
He tapped into something. And one of the things he brought up was an extremely, apparently simple, reductionistic mathematical equation that he felt was the source of most psychological pain. And that was, the equation was something like D equals the difference between R and E. And what that meant was that depression or discomfort equals the distance between reality and expectations. And that's an easy equation that when what's going on is in fact consistent with what you thought should be going on, then depression has no place. Actually, no symptoms have no place. All that's left then is being okay with what's so.
Yes, exactly.
And then the proportionality of like the distance between how you think things should be and how now you are experiencing them, the further that is, the more pain and discomfort you're likely to experience.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I've taken a very deep dive into Byron Katie's work. I don't know if you know her work, and you know, It's exactly that. I mean, she would argue and changes, people's lives in one 20-minute conversation. I've been to her workshops. All she does is help people to make peace with reality, right? And to stop thinking it should be different. And she'll say, how it shouldn't be different? Like if I'm all disgruntled that my partner's not doing the dishes, right? And she'll say, how we know he shouldn't be doing the dishes? Because he's not doing the dishes.
Exactly right.
Right? End of suffering. So
yeah, it's the end of suffering.
And she applies this to to prisoners of war and people who have had extreme experiences of heinous abuse. And it's understanding that we always have choice. We always retain choice, and that degree of responsibility for what is unfolding, which is our choice around either how to literally respond or even just how to internally respond, is what gives us God creating powers, right?
Yes.
So that a patient, who was, in some sort of grandiose state, having figured out the source and explanation for everything, right? Like if we had a culture that helped people to work with that kind of energy and through the development of a meta consciousness, right? Then he would be able to use that gift. He obviously has,
obviously,
and remain in control at the same time, right? Yeah. So it's something like, in the plant medicine world, indigenously, if a shaman is leading a ritual and a ceremony and drinks a plant medicine, he doesn't go nuts, right? He's not screaming and wildly running around. He's developed that meta consciousness that allows him to interact with these more mystical layers from a place of self-possession.
Yeah.
That is what we are asking, patients to do, with no framework, no toolkit, and, no holding, right? So I think that this is a major shift that we are participating in, and it's multi-layered. But it starts with coming in, I personally, my bias is I think it starts with very basic low-hanging fruit of like a physiologic foundation. Like how do you calm your nervous system down, resolve brain fog and headaches and, bloating and fatigue and insomnia and blood sugar imbalances and nutrient deficiencies. Let's just kind of like get that foundation strong so that you can see, because I have one case through my online program of treatment-resistant schizophrenia in a young man. And in 5 weeks, he was on Clozaril, and his mom was going to take him. I might have told you about this case. I still can't believe it. His mom was going to take him to Switzerland for euthanasia. Literally.
No.
Literally. And this woman is one of the most compassionate, loving individuals I've had the privilege of interacting with. And that's how bad it was for him. He was in a living hell on multiple medications from when he was in his early teens. And in 5 weeks of dietary change, he is now, I think he's almost completed his final medication taper. He volunteers, he stopped smoking, he's in the world in a way that he never imagined was possible, right? So to my mind, when it's that traumatic, we might be just dealing with something that there are probably 200 plus medical references on, which is the role of gliadin or wheat containing proteins in brain inflammation, right? So it might not be some spiritual walkabout you have to go on, but let's sort of like first chop wood, carry water, and make sure that you know how to ease your system before we understand what your particular journey is meant to be. But there's some reason that it's expressing in you in this way, and how can you turn toward it and begin that investigative process?
Mm-hmm. Just awesome. Awesome, Kelly. Really, really great. So I know you're running up against it a little bit in time, and I have a couple more questions that I want to ask you. What the obvious one is, like, what's next for you? Like, where are we going? And can I come along? And
so funny. Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting, and I know that you agree already, and can relate. But, I've found that we're kind of at the end of an era, and that era is sort of like the master guru, the doctor patient, the external authority. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean that we have to go it alone. that there's this kind of paradox, like, yes, there's work you have to do, but you can do it with like minds. And so I saw the power of community when I had, I have this 30-day protocol. It's very basic. I worked with, in my practice, one-on-one with patients, this same protocol. And then I took the same exact protocol and put it online, except the only difference was that there is a community, Facebook community, right? And so the outcomes that we continue to get from Vital Mind Reset, the online version of my private practice, literally make it look like I'm doing something wrong in my private practice, right? So it's like a real ego blow, because it's like the more contact somebody has with me, the slower the outcomes, the more limited they are relative to this online space where there's really no direct contact with me. Awesome. And there's the community. So that was very sobering to me. And, the program is for serious, sort of recovery processes, right? So it's not for everybody. So we created kind of a baby steps version. So again, if that's the yang, then the yin is this month-to-month membership, low-cost membership we created called Vital Life Project. That's for people who just kind of want to dip a toe in, or maybe they're not ready for whatever is on the other side of the tidal wave of their transformational portal through this month, right? And maybe they just want to sort of like slowly dip a toe in. And I found, we're a couple of months into this, and this is meant to be the companion community to this book. That, wow, again, Kelly learns a lesson. It doesn't need to be this deep dive, hardcore, like go big or go home, which is kind of my personality, right? That in fact, we're having dramatic, feedback of people sort of finally feeling like they're in this safe place, finally seeing, the ways in which they were struggling to fix themselves, now kind of understanding that they just have to learn what their basic needs are and respond to those with loving attention, right? From this membership where we just do one little lifestyle hack challenge, like go to bed at 9 p.m. a week per month. That's all we're doing. But it's a community of people who fundamentally believe in this mission. And so I think that, I don't know, I almost envision it. It's like we're slowly recognizing that we're all part of one big organism, right? And that every man or woman for herself, or aligning with our team and fighting the rest, like that's not serving us, right? It's like the cancer model of the meta-organistic, organismic biology. And so it's like, okay, so we're recognizing we're different cell lines and different tissue types. And how can we find our type, right? Like our resonant, our resonant frequencies. Like how can we come together and say, oh, you're a liver cell too, me too. Awesome. And that doesn't mean that the heart cells are wrong. It just means they're another organ and good that they stay there, right? So I kind of see that happening. And, and I feel that there is a growing energy for this mission, while there is also tremendous resistance. And that's the nature of it. It's the nature of it.
So how can someone get more, other than picking up this book? And tell us a little bit about the book, just so people will know that what you just wrote. And it seems like it's your opus anyways for now. And so
yeah, hopefully it's a mic drop for a while, because talk about a spiritual process. Writing a book is can bring your ego to its knees for sure. So it's called Own Yourself. It's out September 17th, and I'm hoping to really just equip people with a toolkit for navigating the dark night of the soul, but also specifically navigating, sort of a non-medication based lifestyle in general. So there's like tips and tricks about how to work with UTI symptoms, without taking an antibiotic. It's very broad-based perspective on living more fearlessly and working towards that on a physical level, to a spiritual level. And so that's available. And then the rest of my offerings are on kellybroganmd.com. And I'm just so really blessed to be able to have this kind of conversation. It's been quite an isolated journey for me. And I've been okay with that. But as I come into contact with more and more of my unmet needs, I see, well, it's really not been okay. Ultimately, I was feeling myself against that seeming reality. So I'm very grateful for your support and our shared mission.
Thank you. So yes, is there any kind of events or anything else happening for you? Is there any conferences or webinars or courses, or are you kind of going to lay low for a little while, or how does someone contact you if they're interested in learning more about what you're up to?
Yeah, so I am keeping it mostly online. And in fact, I've dedicated my partner Sarah and I have dedicated a lot of our attention to finding new online platforms just in the current climate of Google censorship and, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram sort of being fundamentally at odds with a lot of what we're talking about here. So we're even investigating alternatives, and there's in the holistic realm, there's a lot of powerful, smart people who are going to come up with those alternatives. So I'm pretty excited about, collecting globally in ways that, when I show up at a conference and there are 100 people who've had to schlep across the country to be there, it's not available. So yeah, I can focus mostly on online offerings for now.
Very great. Very great. All right, Kelly, it's 3 minutes to the hour. I know that you have a hard stop. It's been a spectacular time meeting you. I look forward to our next contact. I hope that it's very soon. I have some ideas I'd love to share with you about ways that we might be able to go in parallel or even together. Awesome. I love what you stand for. I really do. I love this book. I've had the opportunity to read, some of it already, and I'm going to finish it here in the next day or so. And I really love having a kindred spirit or someone who's really up to at least way close enough of a pathway. And however we got here was differently, but we're both here with eyes open. And so I really, really, really thank you for not only validating where I am, but for being, front edge and so, in fact, so humble, vulnerable, available, and brilliant, and beautiful too. So thank you so much for being exactly you.
Thank you. Really, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll catch you on the next go around. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you,
Kelly Brogan,
so much.
You folks. This is Kelly Brogan. Kelly Brogan's a psychiatrist who we've run into each other in the last couple of years. Finally found out that we were both existent, and it's been a real pleasure interviewing Kelly today. And feel free to check either of us out if any of this is interesting to you. I'm at drfred at welcometohumanity.net. Kelly, what's any ways that they might be able to call you or email you?
Sure. The email, it's just office@kellybroganmd.com.
Okay, awesome. Perfect. All right. Have a great afternoon, Kelly, and a great week. Just a pleasure. Bye for now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ciao.
Thank you.